Recording.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the world of Kabbalah, lesson 2. So let's do a quick review of what we learned last week. Okay. So first, anyone was able to implement some of the tools? Anyone had obsessive thoughts coming to their mind and was able to channel it? You put it in your pocket. You put a positive thought in your pocket. Okay. If you haven't done it this past week, do it tomorrow or tonight when you get home. Put yourself in a good space for 10 minutes, listen to good music, create a memory, a safe zone that you keep in your pocket. And whenever your coworker says something nasty to you or you're reading the news, you could always direct your thoughts, because your thoughts and your words and your actions, they are not bound with you. They are garments that you could change. You could direct and focus. Okay. Let's go. Okay, so last week we explained the concept of how the Kabbalists see the universe. That really we're standing in space and time, but there's many layers and many dimensions. And these dimensions represent different level of divine awareness. So if you're living in the physical universe, you have almost zero divine awareness. At best, you find meaning. That's the spiritual level of the lowest world of Asiya. The world of action is at best, you find meaning in action. And then as you ascend the rungs, you connect to deeper levels of the world, deeper dimensions of the world, and deeper dimensions within yourself of higher levels of consciousness and greater levels of awareness and unity. And our soul makes the journey through these levels, and depends how much simmering and soaking and marinating it does in the different worlds. That's the amount of the greater degree of self-concept we have, the greater degree of independence we have from the cosmic oneness. So just like the toddler feels very connected to the parents, and their opinions are quite aligned with their opinion of the parents. And then you have the teenage syndrome that represents the opposite extreme of grown-ups eating in their parents' kitchen and sucking all the resources of their parents, but feeling, Dad, you don't do anything for me. Mom, you don't care about me. It's different levels of independence. And God wants that. God wants us to feel independent and to have the ability to act in our own free choice, free volition. So he blocks out his awareness. And that was the 3 worlds that correspond in ourselves to thoughts, speech, and action. But there is a 4th world that we didn't speak about. And take out your map. We're going to look at the map today, and we move up a run. So we start at the bottom of the map, the blue, and now we make ourselves to the 4th world. It takes up a lot of space on the chart, but it's 1 world. Last week we focused on 3 worlds. Today we're going to go up 1 rung to the 4th higher world called Atzilut. That's the dawn of limitation. So as we learn about the world of Atzilut, we'll start off with a video. We'll watch the lesson video. A lot of it will be new information, and new information is hard to digest. So after we watch the video, we'll spend 20-30 minutes unpacking the video, explaining the different concepts explained in the video. Now, I want to introduce to you an important idea to always remember, and that is that the topic that we're learning is Kabbalah. Another name for Kabbalah is Sod, which means secret or mystery. And the teachings that we're presenting in this class, they will always remain mysterious and secret. Because if you understand it very well, you're probably anthropomorphizing and making it too physical. So you probably have to check yourself and do some work to make sure that you understand that we're talking about very spiritual, abstract concepts. However, if the teaching remains too abstract, then you're also not learning Kabbalah, because Kabbalah is meant to be practical. So that's why it remains a mysterious and secret even after you spend your whole life learning it, since it's supposed to it's supposed to capture the incapturable. It's supposed to describe the indescribable. So that's what we're learning today. We're trying to give descriptions to things that are very difficult to describe. And if you think you described it, then you probably went too far. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find that balance, and it's what God wants us to do. And if we ever get too comfortable, we know we have to check ourselves. But if we never incorporate the message into our life, then we also know we have to check ourselves. We always have to be finding that balance of trying to make it personal and meaningful, and yet recognizing that it's always will remain beyond us. So if you walk out of this class and say, Rabbi, I didn't understand anything, I'll say, good, great, that was perfect. No, okay. Okay. So let's start with the video.
Welcome to the second video in our captivating series, where we continue our journey through the mystical realms of the Kabbalistic system. In our previous video, we delved into the worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya, exploring three existences that feel independent of God. Today, we venture into a divine world. Welcome to Atzilut. To truly grasp the world of Atzilut, let us ponder a basic question about God. On the one hand, our sages referred to God as the Holy One, blessed be He, choosing the word holy to emphasize that God is infinite, transcending specific and definable qualities. On the other hand, the Torah describes God as bearing specific attributes: kind, merciful, compassionate, to name a few. So, which is it? Does God have specific praiseworthy characteristics, or is He beyond any description? Allow me to clarify this through an analogy. Imagine you're a brilliant scientist entering a classroom to convey your theory to a group of teenagers. The problem is that your idea is too abstract and complex for these young minds. So you ponder, rethink, and finally find a relatable detail within your theory that you successfully share with the students. In this example, there are two different levels within your single mind. There's your default mind, operating when teaching your elite students, and a second layer of your mind that produces a simplified version that the teenagers can understand. Here's the crucial point. Both levels are your mind. The Kabbalists use this parable to help us understand a divine truth. Yes, God is infinite and beyond description, but this absolute infinity includes the capacity for finite expression and specific attributes. Why? Because if we were to claim that God lacks this ability, it would imply a limitation, and God is without any limitations. But this only means that God's infinity includes the potential for finite expression. A potential does not imply actual definable attributes. That's why there's a second important step here. Kabbalah reveals that God chose to actualize His capacity to be finite, giving birth to 10 definable expressions known as sefirot, numbered entities. It's like the teacher who doesn't suffice with having the potential to reach young minds, but actually gets into the classroom and relates the deep ideas to the simple minds. That's the mystical secret behind the sefirot. True, they are not God's essence, but on the other hand, they are God's attributes. They don't feel as though they are outside of God. That's why we refer to them as Elokut, godliness. And that's why we call this world Atzilut, which derives from the word Eitzel, meaning together with God. Now, you might be wondering how this relates to us. Our souls originate in Atzilut, and our soul's powers are the mirror image of these 10 divine attributes. Each morning, as we engage in prayer, we remind ourselves of this fundamental truth. The soul you have put into me is pure. We reconnect with our Atzilut identity. This realization serves as a profound inspiration to infuse more spirituality into our lives. It tells us that we possess the power to pursue the path of the divine, and that this is our truest identity. This understanding also empowers us to make a tangible impact on the world around us. Our souls are deeply rooted in Atzilut, a realm of complete divine identity. Therefore, we have the ability to introduce positive change and foster greater awareness of the divine in our immediate surroundings. So let us discover our connection to this divine world and harness the power it bestows upon us. Remember, you are a vessel of divine light, capable of making a profound difference.
Okay, so we're going to spend the next couple minutes to unpack this video. If you understood this video completely, you could step away for the next 20 minutes, come back, you're not missing anything. But there's a lot to gain, and we'll learn a lot about this video. So we're in the course map. Last week we did the blue part, Biyah, and now we introduced the fourth world, the highest world, called Atzilut. Now it gets its own separate lesson because in form, this world is identical to the lower three worlds. But in essence, in function, in quality, it's totally different. So in its structure, it's the same. In its substance, completely different. And that's what we're going to learn about today. So, this is the question. Can we say that God is kind, mighty, and wise? If you think God is kind, raise your hand. Perfect. And by the way, Joel, I saw you raise your hand earlier. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know you weren't coming through. I thought it was, never mind. It's okay. Forget it.
Perfect. Okay. If you think God is wise, raise your hand. Okay. Now you're not alone because the prophets and the Torah says this about God. So you're in good company. However, there was a prophet who made this declarative statement, who said, if you call God great and powerful, you are minimizing God. You are minimizing God. When Moses was reminding the people about their Sinai experience, about their experience that the Jewish people had at Mount Sinai, what did he tell them? He told them, remember, you didn't see any image of God. God wasn't in a body. God didn't have qualities to him. He is no image. So we have this contrast. On the one end, we have describable qualities to God. God is great. God is kind. God is mighty. Not just that. We say God created us in his image. That means that he has an image. If he created us in his image, so then God has an image too. And yet, Moses says, remember, God has no image. God is ineffable. God is indescribable. Is God the transcendent one who is free of attributes, or the immanent one who bears specific praiseworthy attributes? Which one is true? There once was a rabbi in his kitchen trying to mediate between two arguing parties. And one said, Rabbi, you have to understand, I'm completely right. And he made his case. And the rabbi listened. He says, you're 100% right. But then the other person made his case. And he said, Rabbi, you don't understand. So the rabbi said, you're 100% right. So the Rebbetzin from the kitchen screams out. He says, how could they both be right? He says, you're right. And that's the answer that the Kabbalists give to this question. Is God transcendent, or is God ineffable. And they say, yes, yes, it is true that if you put God in an image, you are worshiping idolatry. You put God in a box, you are worshiping idolatry. The Jewish God, the God that Abraham taught the entire world about, what is he, a bearded man in the sky with a stick pointing down at wicked people? That's not the Jewish belief of God. God is infinite, infinite oneness. And yet the Torah says God spoke to Moses, God's hand, outstretched arms, took the Jews out of Egypt. So what's going on over here? And this is how the Kabbalists explain it. They say, this is Kabbalistic term number one, is pshitus, simplicity. And simplicity is it doesn't capture the fullness, but it's a state of abstractionness in the sense of transcending definable qualities and specific attributes. And we say, this is God. God represents the perfect simplicity. That means if you say God felt about, when you speak about God felt about things this way, but now he feels about things that way, that means you just said something. How can you say that about God? God is above change, above time, above anything you could describe to him. And this is and anything you do to adulterate this point, you're not speaking about God anymore. It's a powerful concept. This term is what we mean whenever we try to say something is holy. Have you ever thought about the word holy, what it means? Holy means holy. Yeah. But what does it really mean? When we say something is holy, what we really mean is it's separate and distinct. It's unique. It's not regular. And that's the name that we use for God, and very often is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. And when we want to say God made us different, we say Asher Kidishanu b'mitzvotav. He has made us holy with His mitzvahs. That means He's lifted us up to be above the regular nature of the world. When we do His mitzvahs, we could stand up above nature. So that's the idea of the word kiddush, is we sanctify the Sabbath, we make it holy, we make it distinct, we make it stand above the regular 6 days of the week. So that's true about God. But then the Kabbalists give an important metaphor, and that is the metaphor of the genius of geniuses reaching all minds. And what that means is, like we saw in the video, you have the professor who wants to be relatable to the students in the room. He has two options. Number one is just sit down and read them children's books, right? But when he does that, and when he sits down with them and is reading children's books with them or playing with toys, is he really sharing anything about his genius? No. He's sharing nothing about himself. So he's connecting to them on their terms, but they have no way to connect to him on his terms because they have nothing, they don't know anything about his genius mind. But if Albert Einstein walks into the classroom, thinks about his genius mind, some deep theory that he came up with, E equals mc squared, and now he's going to figure out how to make this idea relatable. So he has to take tremendous effort and tremendous work to distill this information and find one area that the children can relate to, and within that see this grand concept of E equals mc squared. So he does that. He shows a yo-yo or something, energy, movement, matter. He has some way to show it to them. Now, when the children hear this presentation from Einstein, do they have the whole genius of Einstein? No. They have just one part. And the great risk is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Anyone ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? No? Okay, this is a scientific term that they noticed that sometimes people watch a 10-minute YouTube video and they think they became the expert on the topic, right? That could happen. You watch 10 minutes of a Ben Shapiro debating Hamasnik, and now all of a sudden you understand the Middle East. Okay, fine. So this is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a fallacy. But these students might fall into that fallacy and say, now I know everything that Einstein has to say. But if they're smart, they'll know, I know a little bit, and now I could work my way up. I could build on that information until eventually I could gain some grasp. And so sometimes you have teachers that are brilliant in their mind, but they just don't know how to explain it to other people. And some people are very good at explaining concepts, but they're not very deep, right? The real genius is someone who has real genius in his head, but he's so genius that he has so much mastery over it that he can articulate that information to someone low. And that says the wisest man who lived on earth, his name was, and who do they think the wisest man according to Jewish tradition? Yeah, Rachel, we can't hear you, but I saw your mouth saying
King Solomon.
King Solomon.
Shlomo
Very good.
HaMelech.
Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest man to ever live. Why? Smarter than Moses. Okay. Now, what was his brilliance? He was able to take a very abstract concept and then give 300 parables on the concept. They weren't 300 different parables on the concept. He would give a parable. He says, you understand this concept? Yeah. Now, that explains a parable, which explains a more abstract parable, which explains a more abstract parable. If you had time to listen to all 300 parables, then you would understand a brilliant concept. Now, he couldn't just skip. It wasn't random. You had to hear the first parable to get the idea of the second parable, to get the idea of the third parable. So you could work your way up with greater degrees of abstraction. The same thing is with God himself. God's essence is simple, is pure, is indescribable, indefinable, ineffable. However, God said, I want to have a relationship with mankind, with the universe, and I don't want the relationship to be that I go down to their level, but they have no way to come up to my level. I want it to be two ways. So I could tell them stories, play games with them, but then they have no way to work up to my level. So I'm going to contract myself, limit myself into definable attributes. And this is the mode of how I will express myself to the universe. And they will also have within them these mirrored concepts. And they can use that to work their way up and get close to me. Can they get close to my essence? No, because they're finite creatures. But my essence can express itself in this finite window. So let's give an example to make this more real. But so we have two truths at the same time. We have, as the rabbi said, you're right and you're right. Both right at the same time. God is transcendent. He's attributeless, ungraspable. Anything you do to corrupt this is a corruption of God. And that, when we refer to God in this way, we call him HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be he. Right? When we say, Yiskadal v'yiskadash, Shemei Rabbah, we're saying that idea. Or Kucha Brichu, we say it in the Kach. God ornaments himself with 10 definable and limited attributes. Okay? These are called the 10 sefirot. And don't worry, we will take time to explain the sefirot. But before we explain the sefirot, let's just give an example for this. Okay. What do you see on the screen here? Do you guys see anything on the screen? Nothing? You don't see anything? There is something on the screen. I wrote something here, but you can't see it?
Oh, I see white.
You just see white?
Mm-hmm.
So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to use a black paper and I'm going to put it in front of the projector. And this black paper is going to have a cutout and it's just going to show you the word that I wrote. But I didn't have time to actually cut it out. So I'm just doing it digitally on the screen, especially the Zoom students can't see the projector that we have here. Okay. Now you see the thing. Okay. The thing is, it was always there. That word thing was always there. It was on the white. It was there. You understand? It was there the whole time. Infinite words were there. But the word thing was also there. Okay? The same thing when God has infinite. So kindness, to call God kind, you just limited God because he's infinite. But is kindness there? Of course, kindness is there. Just like thing, it was written on this page. The word thing, the word thing was on this page. Now that I told you that it says thing here, you can visualize it, even though you don't see it. But in your mind's eye, you can visualize, yeah, I could see where the thing is written. I have a memory of it. And now we see where the thing is. That is the same exact concept when we get to the idea of sefirot. Sefirot are these 10 pathways, these 10 different channels that God chooses to express himself through this 10 channels. And each channel represents something different. And we also have within us these same 10 facets. These 10. That's a great question. And I don't know the answer to that. In other words, it's mysterious. We know that this is how God did it. And God could have done 20. And if he did 20, what would your question be? Why'd he do 20? Why? For some reason, how do we know God did? So it's a tradition that's passed down from Sinai. But let's look at the verses that describe this. So let's look at text 3 on page 42. Okay. And over here on page 42, we see it says, God with wisdom founded the earth, with understanding established the heavens. With his knowledge, the depths were split. So we have here 3 intellectual powers of wisdom, of understanding, of knowledge. Okay, we're going to take time later to explain these concepts, but we see here in this verse, it alludes to 3 of the 10 attributes: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Okay, now let's take a look at text 4. Text 4 from Chronicles. And this is something we say in synagogue, if you remember from the high holidays, when we take out the Torah scrolls and we walk around the shul, we sing a song. L'cha Hashem hagdula v'hagevura v'hatiferet. If you're familiar with that tune, or there's other tunes for it, let's read it in the English. Text 4. Unto you, God, is greatness and power, beauty, triumph, splendor. All in the heavens and on earth, unto you, God, is kingship. Okay, now you might see whatever nice descriptions about God, but the Kabbalists say this is what the oral tradition is referring to as the 7 emotional soul powers, the 7 emotional attributes. And if you look on your chart, that's what you'll see. If you look on the map, where did I put my map? Here it is. Okay, if you look on the map, you might see that there's 10 sefirot. We're ignoring the yellow. The yellow is the top. That's going to be in next week's lesson. But we're the lower 10. And so God has 10 channels, and we have 10 channels. Now, the truth is, these 10 channels don't only exist within man, they exist within the universe, and within every universe. Last week, we described 3 levels of 3 deeper dimensions, 3 worlds. So it also has these 10 channels, right? So every dimension of divine awareness and separateness and ego and individuation, it's using the same system. It's using the same tools. So that's how we're able to build up to God, because we have it within us. The higher level, also, the higher dimensions also have it, and the higher dimensions also have it, all the ways till we get to God himself, that God is focusing his infinity to express itself in these 10 ways. But the important thing to remember is that this was God's choice. This wasn't the default. That's not the essence of God. Whenever you turn this choice and you make it as if this is the essence of God, that is idolatry. It's not the essence of God. It's not the default of God. It's God's choice to make himself relatable to us. So he expresses itself to us in these specific ways, and he created us in that way to mirror it. Yes.
C6. Listen,
Yeah.
remember this.
So
See greatness, power, beauty, triumph, splendor.
yeah.
And they say kingship is 6.
When it says all in heaven and on earth represents the sefirot of Yesod, which means connection. It's this idea of going from the highest to the lowest. It's a certain soul power that will touch upon. That's see, we read these verses, it means nothing to us. They're like, whatever, it's words on a book. But when the Kabbalists see this, they see a whole different dimension to this. And we get a taste in this course to taste a little bit about how the Kabbalists study every single verse in the Torah, that they read it in a whole different dimension. Let's read from the Maral of Prague. Anyone familiar with the Maral? I know Joel is taking a class of learning some teachings of the Maral, right? Am I right? Okay, so let's read a little description. He was a Kabbalist. One of the things he's famous for is actually creation of a golem. Anyone heard of a golem? Well, you might know it from which movie has a golem? I don't know. Lord of the Rings has Gollum. Okay, fine. But this is where does it all come from? Where did the creators of Lord of the Rings get it from? Right. So this is who we're reading about. We're reading about Maral of Prague. He was a Kabbalist, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism in his time, and so legend has it that using his Kabbalistic powers, he created a golem. A golem means a form, but it wasn't a speaking form. Only humans could speak. He was more like a humanoid created from Kabbalistic powers to protect the Jewish people. Fine. So that's where Hollywood gets it from. Now, that's just a side note. That has nothing to do with today's lesson. Let's read something interesting. Text 5, what he writes. He writes, our sages purposely referred to God as Kadosh, the Holy One, blessed be He, as opposed to the Intelligent One, blessed be He. For God's true self is unknowable. All that we know about God is that he's detached from and beyond every form of physicality and any existing entity. It is therefore appropriate to refer to God as the Holy One, for the term Kadosh describes an entity that is transcendent. Indeed, God is Pshitut, the ultimate abstract simplicity. And yet, let's go to Ibn Gabbai. Ibn Gabbai writes, let's see if I can find this. So let's first read the Zohar. The Zohar is one of the foundational Kabbalistic texts, text 6. He writes, the Zohar is describing God. It says, you are one, but not in a numerical sense, right? Because one is finite. One, not two. One. No, you're one as in essentially one. You are exalted above all the exalted ones, hidden from all the hidden ones. No thought can grasp you whatsoever. You are the one who has brought forth 10 ornaments, which we call the 10 sefirot, to direct concealed worlds and revealed worlds. Now, it seems to be contradicting itself, but based on what we explained, was that God on his essence is simple, but within the simple, you find everything in potential. There's infinite potential. And then God chooses a specific kind of potential to realize. And in this case, he chose the 10 sefirot. Now, the important thing here, let's go to text 8. This is from Rabbi Meir Ibn Gabbai, also a great Kabbalist from the 1500s. He writes, The infinite one is perfect without any flaw. Should you assert that he has infinite power but lacks the power of finitude, you deny his perfection. If you say God is so perfect that he cannot be infinite, you just put him in a box. His box is infinity. That was the box you created for God. So you just put him in an image of infinity. And God is imageless. He is infinite, but he's infinite in a way that he could also appear in a finite way and show up to us and be a personal God to us.
God any way you would like to think of it. Trying like if the individual person or he's created his image, to think of him the way you want to think of him, because it's infinite the amount of thoughts you could have of him.
Yes, but if you say that that's who he is, that's a form of idolatry. In other words, if you look throughout the prayers, we say God is our Father. Oh, I have an image of what my father was. Hopefully your father was nice to you, so then you have positive feelings to your father. Okay. God is a king. Hopefully you have positive associations of what a king represents and you don't think it's a dictator. Okay. Great. So God is a king. God is a shepherd. God is our groom. God is our, which one is he? God is my mother. God is my, which one? He shows up to us in all these different ways. And we feel it in these specific ways because we also have within us these different dimensions, and that makes it relatable. But if you think that that's who God is, you just put God in an image. And now you understand how the Jews, 40 days after the Sinai revelation, they're making a golden calf. What's happening is they're trying to relate to this infinite God. And what happens is you really want to get close. And so sometimes, unfortunately, you put God in these boxes, in this image. And that's what they were trying to do. They're trying to create some representation in order to make God more relatable. But you take it too far, you end up with idolatry. So that's the difficult job. We want to be close to God, and God wants us to be close to him, but God doesn't want to think we have the full picture. It's like little kids think their parents, their whole existence of their parents is to serve them, right? That's what kids believe. I exist, and my mom and dad, their whole existence is to serve me, right? When they grow up and become parents themselves, they discover that, hold on, mom and dad have a whole life before I existed and after I existed, and that's the mature response. The same thing is with God. God had a whole life before we existed, and he still has a whole life even after we exist. But he still shows up for us in a way that's relatable to us and cares for us. This is a very important concept. If you got this concept, you're in good hands. Okay. Any questions before we move on to explaining the sefirot in more detail? Okay. Now we're ready for sefirot. First of all, now you understand why the word godliness is a. You ever heard the word godliness? This is when we're trying to express something that's not God's essence, but God showing up in a specific way. That we call that godliness. If you call it God, you just put God in an image. Godliness, we say it's God showing up in a specific way. So it's holy, it's sacred, it's godliness. It's not God's essence. Let me describe this with a story, actually. There once was a little boy. This is a true story. He was an orphan, and so he was raised by his grandfather. His grandfather was a great Kabbalist, great master, a genius, a Torah scholar, the founder of the Chabad movement. His name was Reb Shneir Zalman of Liat. Well, Shneir Zalman is raising his 5-year-old grandson, Reb Menachem Mendel. He wasn't a rabbi yet. It was just Menachem Mendel, little Menachem Mendel. And then Menachem Mendel is running around the house, and his grandfather wants to play a game with him. So the boy's sitting on his lap. He says in Yiddish, but I'll translate. He says, "Vu is Zayda." The grandfather asks the child, "Where is Grandpa? Where's Zayda? Where's Grandpa?" So he touches his hand. He says, "That's not Grandpa. That's my hand." So he touches his beard. It's not grandpa. That's grandpa's beard. He touches his nose, his ears, his feet. That's not grandpa. Okay. The boy goes off to the other room to play. And then the boy screams out, "Ow! Zaidi, Zaidi!" So his grandfather comes running into the room. It's like, "Oh, there's grandpa," right? So what did he show with this story? What did he show the brilliance? If you say your hand is you, it's not who you are in your totality, but you are in your hands. You are in your face. You are in your body. The whole you is there. But if you define who you are by your cells and by your biology, they say, I saw somewhere like if you wanted to buy all the organic material that makes up your body, all the chemical compounds that make up your body, it would cost like $8 to buy the chemical compounds of your whole body. To reduce, so a person is worth $8 because that's his chemical compounds. You totally missed the whole picture. That's not who the person is. His chemical compounds is something much bigger than that. That's the same thing. We have God, and then when he shows up in a specific way, it's godliness. It becomes relatable. Okay, so if you know this, you could consider yourself maybe a red level Kabbalist. Red level Kabbalist. Hopefully by the end of this course, you'll be black belts. Black belt Kabbalist. Okay, so let's learn. And so this fourth world, in what way is it a world? We're calling it a world. We're calling it a world because it has structure. It has 10 and not infinite. In that way, it's a world just like the three worlds below it. It has the same structure, but in its essence, it's godliness. It's not independence. It's not ego. It's not creation. It's within God instead of within the world of creation. So the lower three worlds, Beriah means creation. Yetzirah means formation. Asiya means actualization. It's in the world of creation. Atzilut is this fourth world that is on top of it. It's a world in structure, it's the same, but what it represents is God himself expressing himself in the world. So the word is Atzilut, or as Ashkenazi people would say, Atzilus, and it has two names for it. The word Atzilus means emanation and togetherness. It's emanation because it's a world that emanates from God instead of being created from God. It's not a creation from God. It emanates. It's God focusing himself. Think about the projector that we have in this room. Yeah, so we have electricity coming through the outlets. The electricity is undefined, right? And yet, when it comes onto the projector, all of a sudden it has all this, I don't know, colors and form. And that's because you have this little filter inside channeling and directing the electricity into lights, into colors. And that's what the world of Atzilus is taking this undefined electricity and channeling it into light, into this concept. And so that's a metaphor to explain this concept. So on the one hand, anything that exists in that world is Eitzel, is near to God. It doesn't feel independent of God. Versus creatures that hang out in the lower worlds feel independent. Different level of independence depends on which world you inhabit. And as human souls, we have within us all four dimensions. So we could always climb up. Different people live in different dimensions, but throughout the day, we could be ascending and descending in our levels of divine awareness. And so we could start off the day with full self-awareness and selfishness. I'm the only one that exists. But we could elevate that through prayer, through Torah study. And Elikus means godliness, an expression of God that is not God's essential self. So far we have three concepts that we learned till now, is that we have clothing. These are things that are separate from us. They express us and they help us show up in different ways, but they are not who we are. And that's our thoughts, speech, and action. Okay, we can choose to turn it on, turn it off. That we learned about last week. This week, we're learning about the integral parts of ourselves, but is not our essence, like our hand, right? This is integral to us, but it's not our essence. And then there's our essence. That's the me in the story. And so that represents the human psyche is our thought, speech, and action is like our clothing. Our limbs is our soul powers, which is our intellect and emotions. And then we have the essence of the soul that is undefinable, that is infinite, that is pure, that is beyond definition. Okay? So we have all that within us. Powerful. Okay. Atzilut is part of divine identity. So now we're going up to the other side of the map, and now we're going to learn this within us. You ready to learn about Kochat HaNefesh, the soul's powers? So we're looking at, now we're going, this is probably when people think of Kabbalah, they're very often thinking about the map of the soul powers and the 10 sefirot. Right? That's most likely what they're referring to. So what we're going to do first is we're going to explain two main poles of the 10 sefirot. We're going to explain two of them. And once you understand these two, you kind of have a very solid foundation of all 10, because we don't really have time to explain all 10. There's just not a few years ago, we did 6 lessons dedicated to just the 10. Okay, so we're doing it in 10 minutes. So we're going to give you two. Okay, so look at your charts. I keep on misplacing my chart. Okay, on the right side in the center, you see chesed, kindness. Everyone see that? Okay, so this attribute is the soul power to be generous and giving. Now, why does the soul want to be generous? Because that is life. Life is about expansion, about giving, about sharing. This attribute of the soul wanting to give has nothing to do with whether there's a needy person that wants to receive. The soul wants to give. Maybe there's no one to give it to, but the soul, with soul power of chesed, of kindness, wants to give. And God created the world. Where did that idea show up for God? Why does he want to create the world? There was no people to be needy to need his kindness. But that's not, again, this attribute of kindness wants to be kind. It wants to be kind. It wants to be generous. It wants to be giving. It wants to give and share without restraint. And the focus is the need of the giver. I want to give. You might know last week we read a story of Abraham. Abraham was recovering from circumcision, and so God made it extremely hot so guests wouldn't show up to bother him. But Abraham was so desperate to be kind that he was outside of his tent looking, where's the guest? Where's everybody today? So God had some rachmanis, some mercy on him, and sent some angels. Okay, you'll let Abraham feel kind today. And so angels showed up dressed as Arabs, and Abraham took care of them in a very generous way. Now let's look at the polar opposite. Look at the left side. We have Gevura, which is translated as strength, but what it really means is restraint. Restraint and discipline, calculated giving. And the focus is on the deservingness of the beneficiary. So a kind person, someone who's chesed, I don't want to say kind person, but at least chesed, when you think of the soul power of chesed, of kindness, it doesn't care if the other party deserves it or not. It says, I want to give. Doesn't matter if you deserve it. I want to give. Gevura says, hold on. Do you deserve what you're getting? Do you deserve it? Now, which of these is better? Chesed or Gevura? What do you think? What is better?
I like chesed.
We like chesed. We all like chesed. But the truth is, chesed without Gevura is so dangerous. If your child says, Daddy, I want a knife. Sure, why not? Here you go. Or you're giving and giving and giving, and the person is spitting in your face, right? So it's dangerous. Gevura, strength and discipline, especially towards ourselves. What happens if we're very generous with ourselves, forgiving to ourselves? Then we probably won't behave like such a mensch. Because we're always letting ourselves off the hook. I wasn't in the mood. I wasn't. But what about someone who's able to have some discipline and strength and restraint? So which of these two powers is more creative? Kindness or discipline?
Discipline.
And the truth is, they go together. If you have no kindness, you have nothing. You have nothing. But if you have only kindness, then you have destruction. Because it's like you hug somebody to death. You have no restraint. You hug them to death. If you want to build something constructive, you need both of these powers. You need chesed, kindness, and gevura, strength and discipline and restraint. Okay. Now, some people are inherently, so chesed, kindness, is the disposition to give and share, irrespective of the recipient's state. Gevura is the disposition to restrain giving and sharing in order to provide only in proportion to what the recipient deserves. Okay, so if you're grading a test of your students and you decide, you know what, I'll just give checks, 100. Is that a kind teacher or not? Say, in a way, it's an evil teacher, because the student will never learn. And he doesn't know, he doesn't have any feedback, because it's all one way. However, what about a teacher that is extremely exacting to the nth degree? Maybe it's true, but will the student also learn? Maybe the student will be so crushed that decide, I'm not showing up to the next class. So probably what you want first is you start off with chesed. First start off with a little bit of kindness. But when they taste it, then you have to upgrade to some gevura, to some strength. And that's the perfect balance. And that balance is actually represented with the middle column. The middle column is when you have the balance of these two poles. It's called tiferet. Tiferet means beauty. Think of the most beautiful painting. Imagine the whole painting had only one color on it. The whole painting was covered with white or black or red. It's not the essence of beauty. The essence of beauty is when you have contrasting colors working together. That creates beauty. So this middle sephira is called Tiferet, which means beauty. Now, beauty is the balance of generosity and discernment, of being disciplined, being disciplined. He says, I know you don't deserve it. That means he'll put on the test. He'll mark exactly what the student deserves. We'll mark perfect. Okay, you deserve a C minus. Okay, but here's a chocolate for trying so hard. And come over to my house. I'd love to do bubble making like you love to do, right? Such a teacher gifted the student with something powerful, with that's a real beauty. This sephira, this middle sephira, we're going to learn how this sephira gets this power next week. Next lesson, we're going to learn how this middle sephira, because we would all wish we'd had this. Wouldn't we all wish we showed up in Tiferet, in this beauty of harmonize these two poles? We all wish we'd have that balance. And next week, we're going to learn how we achieve that balance. But that's the middle pole. The middle pole is this idea of I'm generous, but I'm discerning too. I'm discerning. I know what you deserve, and I'm sharing the feedback so you know, but it's encompassed with kindness and generosity. It's empathy, sympathy. Empathy comes from this sephira. Now, there could be this could also be distorted. What happens if you're the opposite? The word for tiferet in Hebrew could also be interchanged to hisbarut, which means boasting. Someone who boasts, what does that mean? When they're boasting, that means they're always seeking other people's approval. Right? That means they care deeply about what other people think of them, which is gavura, this trait of looking at the recipients and wanting to be generous. So when you're seeking other people's approval, that is the corruption of tiferet. Okay? But we're talking about the healthy. The healthy tiferet is this idea. So tiferet, beauty, represents harmonization, combination of chesed and gevura. So do we have time? Maybe let's go through quickly, just so I don't leave you hanging, because we only did 3, but we did the main 3. And once you understand this concept, it's a little easier to understand the higher 3, because we did the middle 3, the highest 3 and the lower 3. Let's start off with the lowest 3. The lowest 3 represent executive functions. They are, once I decide to be generous and once I decide to be disciplined, okay, so how do I implement? Feeling, it's emotions that help us, they're executive emotions. That means when I say I'm going to see it through to the end, that's called netzach. That's the lower right. Netzach, which means I'm going to go all the way. I must achieve victory. I must win. Okay? The power of the soul to win and to withstand anything that stands in its way is called netzach. On the lower left, we have hod, which means yielding. It's a style. It says, I'm going to stay so strong to what I stand for, but in a yielding way. That means I don't have to fight with anyone to do it. Let them say what they want. I'm not going to fight anyone. So that's the healthy hod, right? Which here is described as splendor. And then we have yesod, which means connection, the ability to connect to other people. So these three are executive. They're mechanical emotions that help us facilitate the higher 3 emotions of kindness, discipline, and harmony, and beauty, and tiferes. So the lower 3 are executive emotions that help us power and actualize our higher 3 emotions. Okay, if you didn't get that, that's fine. Some people are curious. The higher 3, now let's look at the top of the chart. We have Chachma, Bina, and Dat. I wish I had my map. I don't know. Chachma, Bina, and Dat. So Chachma this is all intellectual processes. So Chachma is a flash of inspiration, a flash of insight. It comes into your head. And some people, they are very good at coming up with new ideas, big things. They're like, wow, how did they come up with that? Brilliant, genius, amazing. And then that's on the right side. But then you go to the left side, is more, let me analyze it, the analytical mind. Let me process this. Let me stretch it to its limits. Let me see how this would show up in the real world. So going from this side to that side is actually different realities. There was once a rabbi redoing the pavement in front of his garage, and it was all smoothed out. But then the neighborhood kids were writing their names in the pavement and putting in their handprints and running it. And the rabbi came running out and is yelling, "You get 5 feet away from my lawn! Back up! How dare you? I spent so much money." So the Rebbitzin, remember this Rebbitzin from earlier, 100% right? Okay, so this Rebbitzin comes and says, "Rabbi, don't you preach about the children and they're the next generation and to be kind and patient to them?" He says, "Honey, that's in the abstract, not in the concrete," right? So we're here in the concrete. Sometimes people have brilliant ideas, but then when you analyze it, you realize, okay, there's limits to this idea. It only works in this scenario, not in that scenario. So that's a process of Bina, of the analytical mind. It says men represent Chachma. They're more prone to the Chachma idea of insight, and women are more analytical. They're able to develop a concept. So men, when they speak, how many words do they say in their sentence? They want to explain a concept. Men, they're stunted in this ability. Women have the ability to elaborate and expand and develop and share. It represents also the type of creation. The man gives a little seed, and the woman spends 9 months developing into something grand. Right. It's like the joke of in the old days, you only had one phone in the home, right? And so the husband's like frustrated every day. My wife's on the phone for 2 hours. I don't have time to use the phone. One day, the wife picks up and is only on the phone for 30 minutes. Says, "Wow, a miracle! Who was that?" It's like, "Oh, it's the wrong number. This is the wrong number, right?" But you really need both of these. You need both. If you don't have insights, if you don't have flash of inspiration, then you don't have anything to analyze and to build on. But if you're only if you don't analyze things and you don't have an analytical mind and process it, then it also goes nowhere. It has no. It's like a flame without a wick. It has nowhere to go. Has nowhere to burn. Has nowhere. You need both. But sometimes you have all this information, and yet you don't personalize the information. And what happens when you don't personalize the information? Also useless. And that's the third middle column it's called das, which means knowledge. It's you personalize this information. There's once a professor, I don't remember his name. I'm calling a blank, but if you know his name, you could put it in the chat. He would teach marvelous courses on ethics. And one time they caught him doing something unethical. So someone called him out on it and said, "You're a professor of ethics and you're behaving this way." So he says, "I also teach trigonometry, but I'm not a triangle." Right? Just because I teach in trigonometry, I'm not a triangle. Yeah, so I teach ethics, but it's not who I am. But das is this ability to personalize knowledge. Sometimes we have a lot of knowledge, but we're not able to personalize it. And therefore, it's not able to impact our heart and not able to develop healthy emotions. So sometimes our intellect and our emotions live in different universes. And when does that happen? Whenever we have information, but we're not able to personalize it. So it was once the previous Chabad Rebbe used to be a smoker. It was normal. Everyone was a smoker. He was a big smoker. He went to visit his doctor, and the doctor said, new evidence, this is in the 1930s, he said, new evidence is telling us that smoking is actually dangerous for you. And then at the end of the doctor visit, the doctor offered a cigarette to the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe said, "I don't smoke." It's like, "Since when?" It's like, "Since you told me the dangers." What's happening here? The doctor himself had all the information, but he didn't personalize it. The previous Rebbe was able to take that information and personalize it. So if we gain mastery over these 10 sefirot, we achieve health. In fact, there's a 7-week period between Passover and Shavuot, which each day we work on one of the sefirot to try to make it healthy and try to make it aligned. Okay, so now you got a little taste of sefirot. And again, a few years ago, we had a whole course, 6 lessons, 9 hours dedicated to the study of this topic. But we're trying to get the big picture, the world of Kabbalah. Now, let's go to making this practical for us. Okay, what skills are we going to learn from this? So first of all, on page 50, this is just an interesting concept, is the prayers have 4 rungs. Actually, I'm going to skip this. Let's skip this, but you should know there's an interesting graphic you'll see on page 50. After the lesson, you could focus on it. And 2 years ago, we did a whole course on prayer, and we went through each lesson. We went through one of these 4 rungs because there's a description of Jacob lying down and having a dream of a ladder going up from earth to heaven and angels going up and down on this ladder. Anyone familiar with this biblical story? He's running away from his brother because his brother wants to kill it. Okay, on the way, he goes to sleep in a holy place, and he dreams of a ladder going up from heaven to earth. But it's not a regular dream. It's a spiritual experience. And the Kabbalists explain that this ladder had 4 rungs, representing these 4 worlds. And Jacob is ascending this ladder. And our prayers that we pray in the morning follow this 4 rungs. It's to help us go from a self-centered state to achieve greater levels of divine awareness and consciousness until we're able to touch the essence of ourselves. I'm going like this, but it's also within, right? It's not in space, it's in levels of abstraction, but in levels of depth too, until we get in touch with the purest part of ourselves. So we have 3 modes of interaction with the world. We have Gevura, Chesed, and Tiferet, right? These are 3 ways that God relates to us. The first 1,000 years that God created the world, God primarily acted through Chesed, through kindness. And that's why the world became very corrupt, because there was no feedback. Yeah, they were misbehaving, but God was giving. God is giving. And so you had the generation of the flood because the world became so corrupt. They had no feedback. They were immature. And so God said, now we're going to go to the other side. We'll do judgment. If they behave, good. If not, not. And went to another mode for 1,000 years. That represents Gevura, discipline. And then God said, you know what? We're going to give the Torah. Tiferet, that's in the 3rd 1,000 years since the creation of Adam. And that allows humanity, it has the best of both worlds. It has the best of both worlds, a perfect balance. Okay. So that's the 3 things. How many colors are there in the visible spectrum? I don't know, there's a lot of colors, but how many colors does a printer need to make all the colors? You need only 3, right? RGB, right? Red, green, and blue. If you're doing on a computer, you need only red, green, and blue. And from that, you can make all colors. Or if you're an ink printer, CMYK, you just need magenta, yellow, whatever. There's other formats how to do it. And that creates all the colors.
Magenta and yellow.
Cyan?
Magenta and yellow.
Very good. Okay, so that's the same way that we have everything in the world. We have so much diversity in the world. We don't just have 10 things in the world. We have millions of things in the world. Where do all these million and billions of things come from? Well, they come from the 10, but different combinations of the 10. They come primarily through 2, which branch out into 10, because 2 branches out into 2 poles, and a 3rd pole, which is a combination of the 2 poles, branches out into 10 for another time. And between that, you have everything that exists in the world. So when a human being is called a small world, it's because we also have that diversity within us. We have everything within us, but in general categories, we have 10. Now think of a stamp, right? If you have a stamp, I'm not talking about a stamp that goes on the letters. I'm talking about an ink stamp, right? If your ink stamp is formless, then what are you going to have on the bottom? 0 form. But if it has a mold in it, and then you stamp, then that's what we have on the paper. Same thing. God shows up to us in a form. He creates definitions himself, and then he imprints himself onto the world. And that's how we have that as well. Something to remember, right? One of the ways, if you're a student of Maimonides, you might know Maimonides is famous for saying that all these expressions of God saying in the world, God spoke, God stretched out his hand, it's all anthropomorphic. It's all just a way to make God relatable to us, right? That impression you might get is that God doesn't really have speech, doesn't really have hands. It's just for us. But comes Kabbalah and says, you misunderstood it. God has real speech. We are imitation. When we speak, we're imitating what divine speech is. When God has real knowledge, when we call ourselves knowledgeable, we're imitating. We're the clones. Not God is the clone. We're the clones. And so if you ever want to learn how to be a better communicator, learn more about divine speech, and then you learn how to be a better communicator. You want to learn how to attain wisdom? Learn more about a divine wisdom, and then you become a wiser person. You might say, Rabbi, how do I do that? Got to study Torah. So study lots of Torah. And I might have videos on YouTube explaining. We did a course on the art of communication. I think I have it up on YouTube. That's literally, we just spent our whole time studying how God communicates and then learning powerful tools, how to become better communicators. Okay, so the 10 sefirot combined to create all that is. Okay, so there's two things to remember. Two things to remember. This is how we're going to end the class. Important tools to remember. Number one, where do our souls come from? Our souls come from this world of Atzilut. That's where they're born. That's where they emanate. In other words, they're not create. There's a candy. What is the candy? It's not jelly beans. Mike and Ike's. Mike and Ike's. What does it say on the back of the box? A great candy isn't made, it's born. Okay? That's the same way it works with a soul. A soul isn't made. It's emanated from God. Your divine soul is an emanation from God. It's not created like everything else. The other three worlds are creations of God. Our soul originates from before creation. It's an emanation. It's God's infinity expressed in a finite way. So if you call yourself God, you have a problem because you're not God. But is your soul godly? Absolutely. Your soul is godly. It's the infinite expressed in a very specific modality. That's for that reason. Definitely. Very good. Godly. Absolutely. Okay. So your soul is godly. So let me give you a parable. There once was a eagle that was raised amongst ducks. And the farmer always raised the eagle as a duck. It was always raised as a duck. And this eagle was always feeling frustrated. How come I'm not being a duck, a good duck, like all the other ducks? And I was getting frustrated at itself. I want to be a duck, and how come I'm not a duck? And then one day, when it grew up, it saw eagles in the sky. It said, hold on, I'm not a duck, I'm an eagle. And suddenly it soared and it became an eagle. We might look at ourselves as animals, petty, corrupted, traumatized, sullied, insincere, cynical, impure. And then we're trying to put on an act as if we're pure. And we feel like a hypocrite a little bit. We feel like a hypocrite. We try to put up a good show for everyone. We're good. We're a mensch. But inside, we might not feel that way. We might feel, actually, there's a lot of parts about myself I really don't like. I'm disgusted by it. I'm ashamed. There you have to remember. Who are you really? In your soul, you are pure. You have a part of your soul that is pure, that is untouchable, that is innocent, that can never be tainted. So if your life's work is, okay, I show myself as a mensch, how can I make sure no one sees that I'm really an animal? That's a frustrating life. But what if you could get in touch with something much deeper than that? And that is that you're really a pure soul. That is the true you. When your soul got embodied, okay, it got traumatized. But the pure soul is intraumatizable. It's indestructible. It always maintains its innocence. It just gets buried under a lot of mess. No, you're acknowledging the mess. What we're saying, there's two objectives. There's two models of therapy. One model is, let's make you into a new you. The other model is, let's uncover the real you. Okay? So your essence is, think about it like you have a garden. On top is beautiful. Then you do some therapy work and you discover that actually you're traumatized and what your father did and your mother did and this happened and that happened. And really you're one big mess and you're seeking other people's approval and everything you do is not for altruistic reasons. Everything you do is unconscious bias and this and that. And we tell you, dig a little deeper. What's underneath all the mud? Treasures, a wellspring of water. There's innocence beneath. So sometimes we have to get in touch with that. We're not ignoring the mud in between. But there's a difference between trying to clean up a diamond versus trying to turn a piece of mud into something beautiful. It's a different project. It's a different excavation project. And that's something we always have to remember. Our soul comes from Atzilut. And this is a prayer we say in the morning. So we have our pure soul is created, formed, and breathed into me. This is a prayer that we say in the morning. This was the original, the long form of Modeh Ani. Let's find it inside. Let's go to this prayer. Prayer 13, text 13. Okay, page 59. My God, the soul you placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me. When we read this prayer, if you don't know Kabbalah, it seems okay, very nice. We're trying to give different synonyms and descriptions to the soul. But now we look at this and say, hold on, I can't believe I missed this. Your soul you place within me is pure. This is describing the soul as it first emanates into existence in Atzilut, in this highest world. You created it. That's when the soul embodies itself in the next world of creation, and then into the world of Yitzira. You formed it, and then you breathed it into me, into the world of Asiya. It's a whole different prayer. Okay? This prayer is a very uplifting prayer to start off your day. And what I'm going to show now is the soul you have put into me is pure. My core identity always remains pure. So what I'm going to show to you is a video of a person named Yehuda Becher. He had a very difficult life. He's 23 years old, and he had a friend who was going through challenges, and this guy decided to sing a song, this prayer, to sing it for his friends. Okay? This was a month before he was murdered by Hamas on Simchas Torah. So we're going to watch that video.
נשמה שנתת בי טהוריי אתה בראתה אתה יצרת אתה נפחת בי ואתה משמרה בקרבי ואתה עתיד לתלה ממני ולהחסיר הבלעדי תבוא כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי ריבון כל המעשים אדון כל הנשמות ריבון כל המעשים אדון כל הנשמות.
Okay. So he shared this 2 months ago, and it's so powerful. And he was gaining strength. God, you will take my soul from me, but I know you will restore it to me. It will be restored to me. It's a Jewish belief of Tchiyat HaMesim. There's the world to come and the resurrection. But as long as the soul was in me, I will pray to you. And he found within this prayer a model of how's he going to go forward in this world? Is it going to be from a place of, I'm a troubled person? Is that who I am? Or am I a pure person that is dealing with a lot of struggle? And so with the song, he's reflecting, I'm a struggling person, but my essence is pure. I'm a pure person that is struggling. But my identity is not my struggles. That's not who I am. I'm a godly person that struggles, that has challenges, that have to work through that.
He's saying that to his friend.
He's saying that to his friends, to lift up his friends. No, he died. This guy died. He was killed.
What was his name? What's his name?
Yehuda Becher. Becher. Okay. Yeah. No. Now, this is one idea that we learned from Atzilus, but I want to bring you into another idea. The other idea is, remember how we described the 10 sefirot and the different personality, it almost feels like we know a chesed person and a gevurah person. You ever feel like you have a couple going on a trip and you know exactly, like, they're each going to go into their role. One parent is just giving, and the other parent is being more tough, right? And each one says, you need this, you need that. So there was once two rabbis, two sages. One, his name was Shammai, and one was Hillel. A convert, Shammai was a gevurah personality. He was a tough personality. It was a disciplined personality, a very exacting from his students. So as you can imagine, his school wasn't as popular as Hillel's. Hillel was very generous and very giving, so very popular. A convert, a Gentile comes to Shammai. He says, I want to convert to Judaism on condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot. What does Shammai say? He chases him out with a ruler. He takes a ruler and he chases him out. So he goes to Hillel. He says, teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot. Hillel says, okay, don't do to others what you don't want to be done to you. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Which school do you think came to the truth? Which of these two academies arrived at the truth? What? The second one? So what's interesting is we say that in the exile, we're all in exile. It says in exile, we follow the opinion of Hillel. Hillel is kindness. And in this time, we're going through so much hardship that we need a lower standard. The bar is too high in Shammai school. But the bar is higher and is more authentic in Shammai school. It says, so when Mashiach comes, a lot of these laws that we ruled to go in accordance with the school of Hillel will change will follow Shammai, because we'll have the strength and the ability to achieve that higher bar. Okay? But let's take a look at a teaching. This is Shammai's final teaching. Let me see if we can find it. And there's so much great reading in the book. Please take advantage of it. But let's see. Find it. Text 18. Let's look at text 18. Page 67. Okay. Shammai would say, make your Torah study a permanent fixture of your daily schedule. Say little and do much, and receive every human with a pleasant countenance. Okay? If you look at his statements, he's making three declarations. Two of them are more disciplined. Have scheduled times to learn. Don't just learn when you're in the mood. Fix it into your calendar. Say little and do much. Discipline. But at the same time, what does it say? And receive every human with a pleasant countenance. Hold on, Shama, you're not famous for that. You threw the guy out of your school with the ruler. Well, he saw what Hillel did, and he incorporated within himself. So what do we see from these two stories? Number one, we see that every soul is different. No two souls are the same. Because it's true, we all have 10 attributes, but there's one attribute that we're more deeply rooted than the others. And so learning about where your soul is rooted helps you identify your mission in life. At the same time, as you know, okay, my mission in life is to lean into my soul gift of being a chesed person, a kind person, or to lean in to my discipline. But at the same time, we also have to remember that we have all 10 within us. So whenever we see that we're taking it too far, we have to say, okay, my default personality is chesed, but I don't have to live there my whole life. I can live there as long as it's serving a purpose. But if it's not serving that fundamental purpose, I can tweak it a little bit. So there's once two fellows, a wealthy man who, and his wagoner. His wagoner takes him into a Jewish town. He's a Jewish guy, and it's close to the Sabbath. So they pull up to a hotel, and the wagoner decides it's early. He wants to go study some Torah in the synagogue before services begin. So he goes there to pray, and he sees a whole bunch of beggars. So he says, maybe you guys, after prayers, will come to eat with me in my room. I have some food. You'll eat with me in my room. Meanwhile, the wealthy person is going to synagogue, and he sees a wagon stuck in mud. So he says, let me try to help out this guy. And he's trying to pull the mud, and he's end up making the thing even much worse. He's end up black and blue, totally muddied, and a disgrace. Because he doesn't know what he's doing. The beggars go home from synagogue, and they're expecting a whole meal, but what does the wagoner really have? Some crackers and hummus, right? Barely anything. What happened here? You had two people had good intentions, but they weren't aligned with who they are. When the wealthy person sees a wagon's in trouble, what should he say? Hey, I have a connection for you. I know a wagoner that knows how to get you out of this mess perfectly. And same thing, the wagoner should say, I have a connection. I know a wealthy person that can take care of you just fine. Instead, they got caught up with the wrong mission. And that's very true to ourselves. Sometimes we take on external definitions of success that are not true to who our soul is. And so it's very important we do an inventory. What is my soul root? Where do I belong? Where is my soul mission? And this is the homework for the week, to come to identify what is my core personality and how can I lean into that to maximize that to the fullest. But I'll never become caught up in that. Whenever I see that it's not serving the right purpose, I'm made up of all 10. I could always lean into a personality that's not my own, if that's what the case needs. But I should remember where my essential calling is where my soul is rooted. So these are two takeaways I want you to embody over the next week. My soul is pure and innocent, and nothing can do to corrupt that. And so whenever I'm feeling ashamed, disappointed in myself, or frustrated with how broken we are or how hurt we are by other people, we have to remember there's a part of you that can never be hurt. No person can hurt you. You can't hurt yourself in that place. You might say, but I did it to myself. You cannot do it to your essence. You could do it to external parts of yourself. You could hurt yourself. Other people can hurt you. It's not your essence. And so you could always bury deeper. And this is a lot of work. That's why we didn't start off with this in lesson 1. In lesson 1, we did the easier work. In lesson 2, this is the harder work. To start identifying, we're not ducks, we're eagles. We're not a piece of one big mess. We're a diamond in the rough. And that's the job we have to do. Number 2, to become aware of our special divine root. Where is our soul rooted in the 10 sefirot? Become aware of it, lean into it, channel it, use it to the fullest, but to also remember that we're made up of all 10. And so if we're ever too generous and it's becoming unhealthy, we could also lean into the other ones too. Okay? And now we'll do the niggin meditation, but again, the niggin is at the end, so it's 8:30. If you have to leave, understand. But we'll go to the niggin. Oh, this is just a good line. Okay, just a story to understand. Mark Twain summarized the story, but let's say there was once a Zusha, and he was panicking at the end of his life. He was very anxious. So the student said, "What are you so anxious about? You're a holy person. You're a great man. What's bothering you?" So he says, "When I go up to heaven, they're not going to ask me why I wasn't like Abraham, why I wasn't like Moses, but they're going to ask me, why wasn't I Zusha? Why wasn't I the greatest Zusha I can ever be?" And so they will ask me when I get up to heaven, why were you not Shalom? Why were you not Joe? Why were you not Gail, Jillian, Stanley? Why weren't we lived up to our fullest selves? Mark Twain said, don't just be yourself. Everybody else was already taken, right? Everybody else is already being everybody else. So you might as well just be yourself.
Lesson 2. The Dawn of Limitation. 1. Reminding ourselves about our Atzilut origins provides us with durable confidence, teaches us that spiritual growth is always within reach, and inspires us to change our environment for the better. 2. It is important to identify the root of our soul by closely analyzing our personality. This will guide us in identifying the mitzvah that requires our special focus in terms of extra time, energy, and resources. The ideal goal would be for us to displace our root sefirot, so to speak, by fully utilizing our God-given potential in a positive way. 3. Part of our spiritual growth involves identifying a trait that is not revealed within us by default and working at utilizing that trait in productive and meaningful ways.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining lesson 2. And I'm excited to welcome, I might not be able to make it to next week. So who wants to teach lesson 3?
Back.
No, because we might have to, let me take a quick poll. Do you guys prefer that we move this to Tuesday next week or skip and do the following Wednesday?
Following Wednesday.
Following Wednesday.
Yes, skip next week.
Okay.
I can't do Tuesday.
Okay.
Wednesday. Thank
Wednesday.
you. Wednesday. What's Tuesday?
Right. Okay, so we're probably going to skip the next Wednesday and we're going to resume in 2 Wednesdays.
No, that wouldn't be Wednesday.
Okay.
Thank you,
Wednesday's
Rabbi.
for Thanksgiving.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all for coming.
Okay.